Good evening, I'm David Nicholas, and next here on CMU Public Television, Representative Kevin Cotter joins us again right here on Capitol Report.
Welcome to Capitol Report, a weekly discussion with your elected officials on the issues and concerns that affect you.
And thanks for being with us here tonight. And this evening, an update of some of our discussion earlier this season as we welcome back Representative Kevin Cotter, a Republican from Mount Pleasant, in his second term of the 99th District. Representative, welcome again to our program. Good to have you here.
Thank you, David. It's great to be back with you.
We had said in the run-up to our sit-down today that a lot of the focus was going to be roads. There is a new proposal on the table, and we'll get to some of the details of what is there now, but hitting the rewind button, as we've done many times, many discussions, including our earlier visit with you, back to Governor Rick Snyder's original call, $1.2 billion per year over 10 years to help us remember. Was this to bring the roads fully back up to where they should be, to give us a level of maintenance? What was that original proposal? Because that time has lapsed since then. So let's go back to that original proposal first of all.
Yeah, so the governor's proposal, as you indicated, just over a year ago at his State of the State address in 2013. And he put out a plan that would get us to that $1.2 billion per year for a 10-year period. And that was geared largely to stop the bleeding, if you will, to get the reinvestment or the investment level in roads back to where it needs to be, to stop the deterioration that we're experiencing right now, and then also to improve those roads somewhat. And, you know, we took that plan back, and the governor, much to his credit, put out a plan and said, if you don't like the plan that I've given you, then feel free to come up with your own solutions. And that really is where we're at now. That's what it's come down to. There have been a lot of ideas that have been floated as to how we can fund roads, because the governor's proposal would have called for increases to vehicle registration fees as well as increases to the fuel tax. And
he acknowledged, as have you and everyone else, the reaction that we got, at least initially, to that idea.
Yes, that did not go over real well. So I spent a lot of time in my district, as did other members, in sharing that potential solution. And the feedback that we got was that we need to work harder, that we need to come up with alternative ideas. And a common comment that I received was that this cannot all come from new revenue, that you need to roll up your sleeves, work harder to find money from existing sources. There was some openness to a combination of the two as far as some new money, but some existing revenue had to be a part of this package.
What did we do then last year? Because it was around, I think, $300 million that was able to eventually get allocated when this plan didn't fully go through, that at least to address some of that problem going into last year's construction season and get us out of a certainly less severe winter than we had this year, by far. Where did that money initially come from last year?
Yeah, there's approximately $330 million that has been new money, but it's important to note that it's been one-time money, so not ongoing revenue, but it came from our surpluses. We've had a couple of surpluses recently. We've been able to tag a certain portion of those surpluses to go into roads. So there was $230 million that will go to new projects, and then the remaining $100 million was to go to offset the increased expenses that our road commissions experienced this winter due to the very severe winter that we had. And so that was a start, but those were just small Band-Aids, if you will. While $330 million is a lot of money in light of the size of the problem that we have, it is a small amount. And so now we have a new proposal that's come out, which I'm very excited about, because this proposal put out by the Speaker of the House about 2 weeks ago, roughly 10 days ago, is something that I think we can get done. There seems to be some broad support around this proposal, and that's what is really I find to be very exciting, because I think we can get this done.
Senator Howard Walker had come out with a plan earlier this year, too, that had called for a reduction or elimination of the state sales tax that was being assessed for gas, but then an increase to the overall state sales tax and a reallocation of that back to the roads, and that reintroduced the question and the concern some had over the amount of the sales tax that by the Constitution has to go to the school aid fund. And this is where the numbers started really beginning to I think, spin around people in trying to get clarification. And obviously it was a very complicated issue, even dating back to that constitutional obligation. Where do we stand then now as to what taxes and where would the status of the school aid fund be in this proposal as written?
And that's one important element of this. One important thing to note is that the current plan would not negatively affect the school aid fund in any way. And so that's very important. And it comes down to the sales tax that's on gasoline. So right now when we fill up at the pump, we're paying that 6% sales tax. Michigan's one of about 15 states that charges a sales tax. And so that's often why we're talking about gas prices, especially coming off of spring break and families are traveling. And they say, why does the rate at the pump vary so much from state to state? And part of it is that sales tax. You know, if you think about, right now we're around $3.60, $3.70 a gallon. If you round that up to $4 a gallon, we're paying 24 cents just in sales tax on fuel, while the fuel tax is only 19 cents. So more money is going into the sales tax than is actually going into the roads. And a good portion of that sales tax is going to the school aid fund. Well, the plan that we have currently would take a portion of the sales tax on gasoline, but only the portion that does not go to schools or local governments. So this is money that is currently spilling into the general fund of the state, and it would direct that in the amount of $130 million a year, and for each year into the future, to roads. So that's one piece of it. Another is a reallocation of use tax, about $239 million. And then there's some other small pieces as well that get us up to $456 million per year going into our roads.
Is this at the core, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, where we got this wrong? Because a lot of people then have been asking me, and they say, you know, when you ask people about this, if we are around 46th, 47th in the nation when it comes to road funding, and I've heard ever since I was growing up, well, if they had put a toll on I-75, we wouldn't have had this problem, or people have said the sales tax structure and so forth. Has it been where those taxes have been directed or allocated that it has not been clarified to the point where we have put ourselves into what has become this cycle of underfunding roads that has now at this point, especially coming off of this winter, put us in this very difficult place we find ourselves? Really,
there's one major reason why we're in the position that we are now, and this goes back to 1997. That was the last major road funding change. And what happened in 97 was we went from 15 cents per gallon on gasoline to 19 cents. So it was an increase, and I often get that question in the district. People say, well, wasn't this solved in 1997? The key problem with the 1997 change was that there was no index for inflation. And so it's not that it wasn't discussed. I've talked with others that were much more, that were tuned in at this point to these discussions, and they said that they could not get agreement as to language that would index us for inflation. And so I make the comparison really to a computer, for example, where it's outdated almost the moment you buy it. Our road funding formula was outdated the moment that we experienced any inflation. And so we're investing still at that 19 cents per gallon, while 19 cents is buying less in the way of labor and the way of materials. But also what is happening is we're getting far better fuel economy from vehicles, which is a great thing. However, it presents a problem because these road miles are being traveled, but we're not getting the revenue into the roads. And so that's why we need to look at this. This package does that as well, as it takes that 19 cents per gallon and changes it from a fixed cents per gallon to a wholesale percentage tax, 6% in this case. And at today's fuel prices, that would be revenue neutral. So it's not an increase as goes to gasoline, but it is a conversion to a percentage, so that as oil prices, which will then follow, fuel prices will follow, we will experience additional road funding. As oil prices go down, if they do, then there would be a reduction there. But this is an effort to try to get some inflationary factor incorporated into our formula.
So to clarify then, this is sustainable? Can be? Or is this somewhere between the one-time crisis fix and again, back to what the governor had said, and that itself was only 1.2 per year for 10 years. Once we got to 10, we were rather going to have to come up with something else. Does this present a framework from which we can build something that over time we can sustain year by year to get the roads back up to where they should be, and then maintain a level of improvement over time?
Yeah, I think this is a partial solution. This is not the entire solution, and obviously if it's $456 million per year, that doesn't equate to 1.2 or 1.4, the number we've been hearing. But this, I believe, is what can be accomplished right now. I don't think this should be seen as the end solution, but I think that there's enough support for these types of changes that largely draw money from other areas in the state budget that we can redirect to roads. However, we know that this is not the end of the line, that we have to continue to work, but I believe that there's the political will there now to get this package done, and I think that we have to attempt to capitalize on that while that will is there.
Has anybody wanted to ask how much worse the roads became due to the extraordinary circumstance of this winter? When the governor was proposing this last year, we've also come off of a winter that all would agree we've not seen the likes of in many, many years in this state. And if we were looking at this much is needed based on where we were, you put on top of that the winter we've just had, how long might it be, and is there a call for an overall reassessment, be it from MDOT or any other evaluation source, to say how bad it really is out there?
Yeah, I think clearly this winter was exceptional when you look at the severity, and it certainly strained our roads. I'm hopeful that we as legislators are allowing the experts to do the calculations on what the exact need is. I think there's been broad support that it was 1.2 when the governor said it was 1.2, and I think it's only gone up from there. And I really hope that we can focus our time on finding solutions, and this, knowing that this $456 million is a step toward that end solution. But I think the severity of the problem is going to continue to increase the longer that we're dragging our feet. The governor, back when he put out the $1.2 billion figure, said that due to the underfunding, that we're losing value in our assets that are our roads to the tune of $3 million per day. So $3 million per day, that's roughly $1 billion, slightly over $1 billion over the course of a year, but because we're underfunding those roads. So when we could be doing maintenance projects to maintain the road, these projects are going undone and allowing the roads to further deteriorate to the tune of $3 million a day. I would assume that number's only gone up since it was stated.
Last piece of this potentially then is a certain measure of controversy. From earlier this month, Northern Michigan Representative Frank Foster pointed to an interview earlier this month with Transportation Chair Representative Wayne Schmidt out of Traverse City, when there was allegedly a quote given to that this was and I will quote here, the first bite, and that while the proposal was revenue neutral for now, lawmakers could increase the fuel tax in the lame duck session. Now, I've not heard anything from what you described that gets at this, and this could have been somewhere intervening what was being proposed or what was about to be proposed, given the timeline from the speaker, but one does have to ask as to what we're looking at now versus what could be coming later in the year if this plan is put into place and work continues. Is there a concern that there is another increase on the way?
I would share that concern. I did not hear those comments. I have heard it stated that this is a step in the process, that there's going to have to be additional work done. I have not heard about a plan as far as a lame duck increase on the fuel tax. I think that would be a very tough sell. That is what the governor proposed, and there was not much of an appetite for that. So I don't see that happening. That's my personal view. I think that we need to get this, achieve this proposal and then continue to look. And I think that we need to continue to have, as any plan, looking to reprioritize existing revenues. I mean, you're looking at a state that's spending over $50 billion a year. Let's work within the budget. Let's prioritize. I think our infrastructure is one of the key responsibilities of state government, in addition to education and public safety. But transportation has to be near the top of that list. And so I think we need to continue to reprioritize spending. And so I don't see there being the political will for a major gas tax increase, but I'll continue to follow this very closely.
For then the proposal that came from the speaker, what do we see then in terms of the timeline? Introduced, as you said a few weeks ago, where are we at then in the movement on this through the House, going on to the Senate? How soon might this all be put into full motion?
Yeah, this package actually was presented just this past Thursday before the House Transportation Committee. So that is when Chairman Schmidt, as well as his other committee members, are just starting to take testimony on this package. And again, this is the House plan. So we have our partners in Lansing, both the Senate as well as the governor. I have not heard reaction from the Senate Majority Leader or the governor to this point. My expectation is that this is something that would be found to be a workable solution, but we'll continue to monitor that as well. So it's hard to say at this point because it's in its first committee hearing. But I think that I'm hopeful, and we'll wait to hear as we put some more flesh on these bones what the likely timeline could be. I think that there's quite a consensus that, as I said earlier, time is of the essence. We need to act, and I think that that's a pretty common feeling.
You've long been a champion for more transparency in state government. We've had that discussion many times here. As we sit down on a Monday, the deadline for candidate filing is Tuesday, the 22nd of April, and it's also going to be the launch from the Midland-based Mackinac Center for Public Policy of Vote Spotter. This is an app that would allow people to more closely track the votes of their representatives and state senators and the like. What's your reaction to this tool being introduced for the voters of Michigan?
I think it's great. I love the sounds of that, using smartphone technology to allow constituents to follow the votes of their elected representatives. Or I hope it'll also have the opportunity to let the people know what's coming up, not what has happened, but what is coming up, so that they can get the opportunity to give that instant feedback. And maybe this application does. I have not looked into this yet, but I think it's fantastic. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for any elected representative, is to provide enough notice to the people about what is coming so that we can get feedback before we actually vote. So often a vote will come up and there's not a lot of notice. I mean, it's working its way through the committee, but we don't know from day to day often what is going to be voted on, maybe with a couple of days notice. But oftentimes we'll take a vote, and then I'll talk to people that I represent, and they'll say, gosh, I wish I had known you were going to be voting on that. So if we can get the word out quicker through an application such as this, I think that's fantastic, because to the extent that constituents can follow that and say, hey, there's a road funding bill coming up, and then to be able to get additional information on that and give us their opinion, that's most helpful.
Since you were with us earlier this year, House passed a six-bill package of legislation that would increase privacy protections for gun ownership, and you were the author of at least one, if not more, of those bills. It was sent on to the Senate, as it was noted earlier on. Where do we stand, and what are the details behind that legislation?
Yeah, so what this package of bills is geared to do is really to address a situation in Michigan that we saw happen in New York. Going back just about a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was a situation where there were two counties in the state of New York in which the FOIA process was used to get information on all gun owners in these two counties. And then an interactive map was created and put online so that anyone could go online to see which residents owned guns and which ones did not. So what this package of bills would do would be to prohibit that from happening, to prohibit gun ownership records from being FOIAble. Now, that's something we always have to be very cautious about. You mentioned earlier that I'm a proponent of transparency, and FOIA is a great tool, an incredible tool, to really allow transparency in the way of allowing information to be gathered. And here, so what we're doing is really balancing that ability to get information against the rights of the gun owner. And I think you could make an argument from both sides of this issue and say, one, some might argue that if I were to look online and see that resident A is a gun owner and resident B is not, some will say, well, resident A is now safer because now as a criminal, I may target B knowing that I won't get return fire. However, we had testimony in the committee that said, no, actually, guns, right there with jewelry, are two of the most frequently stolen items. And so that school of thought says that no, now the gun owner is going to be a target for a home invasion, for example. And so we took testimony on these bills and decided in the end that this was good policy not to allow gun records to be FOIA'd and to allow privacy. So here it's really a fascinating situation when you have Second Amendment rights being put on the table, as well as privacy, as well as a transparency issue in FOIA. It's really a fascinating balancing act to determine what is the best public policy. And in the end, we voted to prohibit that FOIA as it goes to gun records to protect gun owner privacy.
And then where this is still then under consideration, state Senate then, yes or no?
This is now passed the House and is in the Senate. I'm not off the top of my head exactly sure if this has passed a committee in the Senate yet, but it is in the Senate chamber.
And moving then. Also, last month you were the sponsor of one of the bills of a 3-bill package that would allow for expansion of the state's microbrewery industry. What kind of impact could we see to local economies, and what sort of a boon overall to the state's agriculture industry for something like this?
You know, this was a very exciting package of bills. And the reason I say that is, you know, going back to when I first ran for office, one of the many things that I talked about that had to happen in this state was that we needed to get government out of the way. And what I'm talking about when I say get government out of the way, we're talking about senseless regulation. And this is a perfect example of that. Now, we've done a lot of changes to regulation, but this example came forward, and it came forward from the Michigan microbrewing industry. If you go back to, I think it was 1994, legislation was passed in Michigan that allowed for smaller scale microbrewing in Michigan. And this has been something that I've really had an interest in following. A lot of these businesses are you know, popping up across the state, and they're really doing good things, really allowing creativity and experimentation with the craft brew industry. And a lot of these breweries have really grown. And this bill came about as a result of a couple of breweries in Michigan, one which was Shorts Brewing in Bel Air, Michigan. And so when the legislation was passed in '94, there was a arbitrary number was picked as a production cap. Okay, so, and I understand, you know, quite often legislators will be a little uneasy when we bring something new into the state and say, okay, we have to kind of have a trial period, if you will, and set some cap on this so we have to come back and revisit it. It's kind of like when there's a any language put into a bill, sunset, for example, so that the legislature has to come back and review. And so the number that was chosen was 30,000 barrels. I said, okay, 30,000 barrels is the most that a microbrewer can produce. Well, what has happened is Shorts Brewing, as well as some others in the state, have come up through some pretty incredible growth, are up against that cap. And so we as a state were standing in the way and saying, you cannot expand your business. And so these bills changed that. We were able to get agreement to go to 60,000 barrels. Now 60 is an arbitrary number, just like 30,000 was, but it's a doubling of that output, which will allow these businesses that are ready and willing to create jobs to do so. Shorts has already announced their expansion. They're going to increase production and increase the size and number of their employees, and they're looking to add 100 jobs. We have 2 other breweries in the state that are also looking to add approximately 100 jobs over the next year. So by one change in regulation, we're talking about at least 300 additional jobs that we know of, and my hope is that other brewers will follow.
Just a couple of minutes left, but I wanted to touch on one other thing that came through not only your sponsorship, but through the Judiciary Committee, of which you're the chair, and that's legislation that would create statewide policy regarding social media and email accounts for those who become incapacitated or pass away. And it seems like this would be one of those potential gateways for identity theft and other concerns. What was behind this legislation?
Yeah, this came about, and this is related to my prior life before running for office. As I was an attorney, and much of my practice was focused in estate planning. And you know, in estate planning, we help individuals decide how they want to give what they have to whom they want, when they want. And really something that is quite new in the estate planning context, or that we're seeing these issues come forward, has to do with email accounts or quite often social media sites. And so what happens to these accounts and these passwords after a person passes away or becomes incapacitated? And a lot of situations have come forward, and there really isn't a clear solution in law for. So say maybe I'm a young person that goes out and is victim of a horrible event, and I no longer am able, maybe due to my incapacity or death, for any changes to be made to Facebook, for example, would be a great frequent example. And say that maybe before this event I had something that I posted that was less than flattering, that isn't, my family would like some access to be able to get that down, or we're also getting requests for the ability to be able to go on and retrieve photos. You know, in today's society with smartphones and camera phones, we're taking pictures, and quite often the only repository for these photos are online media accounts where they're posted and maybe deleted from the device later. This would allow the family to be able to have access to that. Now what it does is it says that to the extent that the person does not leave any direction in a will or other document as to how they want these accounts treated, then it would allow the personal representative to have access to these accounts for purposes of maybe it's maintaining a memorial page or maybe it's pulling information down. But this is just an area where technology has blossomed and our law isn't prepared for it. So we're trying to work with families right now to determine what is the best way to handle this. I think that this will really be non-controversial, but in the end, hopefully provide a service to families and loved ones.
Well, we'll watch these particular initiatives from you and through your committee affiliations, as well as the major work on the roads and the budget and so forth moving forward. A lot of things on the table as the legislature is now reconvening following the spring recess, and appreciate your time bringing us up to speed on the roads and otherwise as to what is happening and what we have looking forward to coming down the road.
Thank you so much, David. I always enjoy talking with you.
All right, thanks very much. And thank you for joining us too. We have been talking with Representative Kevin Cotter from Mount Pleasant, representing the 99th District. And a reminder that this program will be replayed tonight in our overnight rotation on CMU Public Television, and soon deposited as well with the other programs from this season on the specific website page for Capitol Report. You can go to WCMU.org, click on TV, click on WCMU Productions, and that takes you to the link for this program, for this soon-to-be recorded program, and then also those are from earlier in the season. For all of us here, thanks so much for your time and attention again, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much.
You've been watching Capitol Report. Join us again as your elected officials speak to your concerns on current issues.